Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Today, we're plunging into the fascinating world of data visualization. You've handed us a stack of sources that really highlight something crucial. Sometimes just looking at tables of numbers, from spreadsheets or accounting software, it just isn't the clearest way to understand what's actually going on. It's almost like trying to grasp a whole symphony just by reading the sheet music, right? You miss the performance. So our mission today is to explore how using the right chart can turn that raw data into powerful, actionable insights. We want to help you spot those hidden trends, maybe emphasize relationships clearly, and ultimately just make better decisions. But crucially, we'll also look at the common mistakes, the pitfalls that can totally mislead you, turn clarity into, confusion.
That's absolutely spot on. While those detailed figures and tables, they definitely have their place for precision, they often just don't communicate the story within the data. Putting data into the right chart isn't just about making things look professional. It's really a fundamental analysis tool. And like you said, we'll see today how choosing an inappropriate chart can actually twist the information or maybe just hide what's important entirely. Oh, and for our purposes, we'll use chart and graph pretty much interchangeably, just like the source material does.
Okay, good point. So let's unpack this. Where do we start? Maybe with the basics, charts for just one set of data.
Yeah, let's do that. The most common types, usually designed for a single series of data, think of it as telling a very focused story. One thing over time, or maybe across different categories. These typically have two axes, right? You've got your independent variable, oftentimes categories, on the x-axis, and then the dependent variable, what you're actually measuring, on the y-axis.
Got it. Like sales over years.
Exactly. So let's kick things off with column charts. You can see examples in Chart 1 and Chart 2 in our sources. These present data vertically. Simple columns, all the same width, and their height shows the value. Chart 1, for instance, shows total sales over 5 years. Makes it really easy to compare year on year.
Right, you can see the ups and downs quickly.
And Chart 2 switches it up a bit, showing sales by business division, but just for 1 year. It's worth noting some stylistic differences too, like Chart 2 is 3D, and the A-axis scale is adjusted to show around thousands.
Ah, the 3D effect. Does that cause issues sometimes?
It can. That's a crucial tip for 3D charts like Chart 2. You need to read the value from the back wall of the column. The perspective, the sort of illusion of depth, can make the front wall look like it lines up with a different value on the axis.
Ooh, sneaky. So you could unintentionally mislead someone or be misled yourself.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You're not careful.
Okay, so columns stand tall. What about bar charts, like Chart 3? They look similar, but sideways.
Yep, exactly. They serve pretty much the same purpose as column charts, just presenting the data horizontally. This can be really useful if you have, say, a lot of categories, or categories with really long names that wouldn't fit well under columns.
Makes sense. Easier to read the labels.
Then we have line graphs. Charts 4 and 5 are good examples here. These are super common, especially for showing changes over time. The points are connected, and that line gives you a really strong visual sense of flow, of trends, accelerations, maybe sudden drops.
Things that would be much harder to spot just scanning a table of numbers.
Absolutely. Your brain processes that visual trend much faster.
Okay, now here's where, for me, it gets really interesting. You pointed out charts 4 and 5 show the exact same data, but they look so different. Chart 4, its y-axis starts at 0, and the sales growth looks, pretty steady, kind of gradual. Then you look at chart 5. The axis starts much higher, just below the first data point. And suddenly, those same increases, especially like 2009 to 2011 and 2012 to 2013, they look way sharper, much more dramatic.
It's a classic example. And it powerfully demonstrates how scale influences perception. Same numbers, very different visual story.
So the takeaway message is always check the axis.
Always check the axis, especially the starting point of the axis on line and column charts. So broadly speaking, column, bar, and line graphs are all good for showing trends. But line graphs often make those trends, the rate of change, feel more obvious, more intuitive.
Right. Okay, so that covers telling one story clearly. But what if you have, say, two things you want to compare, like sales and costs over the same period? Or maybe sales from different regions?
Good question. Do these single series charts still work? Well, yes, they do. Column, bar, and line charts can all be adapted from multiple data sets. The main condition is that the numbers, the range of the data for each set, should be reasonably similar. Otherwise, one set might dwarf the other.
Okay, so how do you tell them apart on the chart?
That's where the legend, or key, becomes absolutely essential. You can see this in charts 6, 7, and 8. The legend tells you which color or pattern represents which data series. Excel often calls these multi-data column charts clustered chart.
Clustered columns. Okay. And these look really useful for direct comparison, like in chart 6, the clustered columns for sales and costs, or chart 7 using lines for both. You can immediately see how they relate.
Exactly. You can visually track if, say, costs are rising faster than sales.
Like in the examples, the gap between the sales and cost columns in chart 6 gets smaller over time. And in chart 7, the lines get closer together.
Precisely. It's showing shrinking margins very clearly. A powerful visual.
But is there a risk of making things too complicated, putting too much on one chart?
Oh, definitely. That's a really important point. You have to be careful not to overload a single chart. Take a look at chart 8. It shows total sales for 4 different divisions over 5 years. That's, 20 columns on one chart?
Yeah, that looks pretty busy.
You can interpret it, sure. You could compare sales components within a year or maybe track one division over time. But notice, it doesn't automatically give you the total sales figure for any given year. You'd have to add up the segments mentally or with a calculator.
Ah, right. So trying to show too much might actually hide some key information, like the overall total trend.
It can, yes. Sometimes less is more. Maybe 2 simpler charts would be better than one overly complex one.
Okay, so we've compared totals, but what if you need to see how a total is broken down? Like what pieces make up the whole? For instance, what percentage of our total sales comes from each division?
Right. For that, you'd turn to different types of charts. Let's talk about component or stacked charts. Chart 9 is a great example.
Stacked charts. Okay, so the pieces are stacked on top of each other.
Exactly. Whether it's columns or bars, a stacked chart does 2 things at once. The total height of the column or bar shows the overall total value, just like a regular column chart. But then that total height is divided into segments, each representing a different component, usually shown with different colors or patterns.
And how is that different from, say, a pie chart? Pie charts show components too, right?
They do, but here's the key difference. Stacked charts can show this component breakdown across multiple time periods on the same chart. A pie chart can only show one period at a time.
Ah, okay. That's a big advantage for seeing changes over time. Looking at chart 9, it's really clear. You see the total sales growing gradually from 2009 to 2013. That's the overall height. But you also see how the mix is changing. Like the North Division's chunk stays about the same size, while South and East Divisions are growing their share, and West Division, the smallest piece, actually shrinks over time.
Precisely. It tells a much richer story about both the total and the internal dynamics within that total. Something a simple line graph of total sales would completely miss.
Very cool. Okay, so let's talk about the classic pie charts then, like charts 10 and 11.
Right, the pie chart. Everyone knows what these look like. They're specifically for showing how a single total amount breaks down into its constituent parts or percentages. But, and this is the critical limitation we touched on, each individual pie chart can only show the components for one single point in time, or one product, or one location.
Only one snapshot.
One snapshot per pie. The software usually calculates the percentages for you automatically, which is handy.
So comparing chart 10, which shows the 2009 sales breakdown by division, and chart 11, the 2013 breakdown, that comparison really highlights the change in relative contribution, doesn't it?
It does, very vividly.
Like West Division went from having 12% of the pie in 2009 down to just 4% in 2013. That's a big shift in its share.
A very clear shift in proportion. But this brings us back to a crucial warning about pie charts.
Uh-oh. What's the catch?
The catch is they show relative percentages, but they don't show the absolute total values.
Right, so West Division's share went down from 12% to 4%. But if total company sales grew massively between 2009 and 2013...
Exactly. It's possible, even likely in a growing company, that West Division's actual dollar sales might have stayed the same, or even increased slightly, despite its percentage share dropping significantly.
Wow. Okay, so you could easily misinterpret a pie chart if you don't know the total size of the pie? A bigger slice of a smaller pie might be less than a smaller slice of a huge pie.
That's the perfect analogy. Relying only on the percentages without context of the total is a common mistake, and it can lead to really flawed conclusions about performance.
Good to know. Okay, building on this idea of percentages, what about 100% stacked charts, charts 12 and 13? How do they fit in?
Think of 100% stacked charts, columns, or bars as combining the ideas of stacked charts and pie charts. Like a regular stacked chart, they show components. But like a pie chart, they focus purely on the relative proportions. The total height of every column or bar is always adjusted to be 100%.
Ah, okay, so every bar is the same height, 100%, but the segments inside change size depending on their percentage.
Exactly. It's like lining up multiple pie charts side by side over time, but in a bar or column format, which can sometimes be easier to compare visually, especially for tracking a specific component's share over time.
So what's the key takeaway for interpreting these? Chart 12 shows sales divisions, chart 13 production costs.
The absolute key thing to remember for charts 12 and 13, the 100% charts, is that they deliberately remove any information about the absolute total value. You cannot tell from chart 12 whether total sales were going up or down. You cannot tell from chart 13 whether total production costs were increasing or decreasing.
So they only show the compositional change, the shifting percentages.
Precisely. They are incredibly useful for analyzing how the mix changes over time. How did sales percentages shift between divisions? How did the proportion of different cost types change? They answer that how much of the whole question across time very effectively. But again, always remember, a change in percentage doesn't automatically mean a change in the absolute number.
Got it. Focus on proportion, ignore absolute level. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Sometimes you're not looking at totals or parts of a whole, but you want to see if there's a relationship between two completely different numerical things. Like, does advertising spending correlate with sales? Or maybe do higher production volumes lead to lower unit costs?
Yes, for exploring those kinds of potential relationships between two numerical variables, scatter diagrams, sometimes called XY charts, are the tool you need.
Scatter diagrams, you just plot points.
Pretty much. As you see in chart 14, you take two sets of numbers. One set becomes the x coordinates for your points. The other set becomes the y coordinates. Both axes must represent numerical values. So you might plot, say, output levels on the x-axis and the total cost for producing that output on the y-axis. Each point represents one instance, maybe one production batch or 1 month.
And you just look for a pattern in the dots.
You look for a pattern, exactly. Do the points seem to cluster? Do they form a line going up or down? Is it a tight pattern or widely scattered?
Okay, I can see that in chart 14. The points aren't random. They seem to trend upwards. Higher output seems linked to higher costs, which makes sense.
Right. And what makes scatter diagrams even more powerful, especially for analysis and forecasting, is adding a trend line. You see that in chart 15.
Ah, the line of best fit.
Exactly. A line of best fit visually summarizes the general relationship between the two variables shown by the scattered points.
So that line gives you a sort of average relationship, even if individual points are a bit above or below it.
Precisely. It smooths out the noise and shows the underlying trend. This can be incredibly useful for making predictions. If you increase output to this level, the trend line suggests your costs might be around that level.
Very powerful for forecasting. Okay, this has all been about how to use charts effectively. But now let's unpack the other side of the coin, the pitfalls. Because even with the best intentions, getting the chart type wrong or messing up the scale can completely hide what's important, or worse, actively mislead people. This is where data can unintentionally or maybe intentionally lie.
Absolutely crucial section. Let's look at some examples of what not to do. First up, chart A. It uses a line graph to show sales by different divisions. Now, why is this a poor choice?
Well, the divisions aren't really connected in sequence, are they? North isn't followed by south in some kind of progression.
Exactly. There's no inherent continuous flow or connection between division A and division B or B and C. But the line implies a flow, a trend, that just doesn't exist conceptually for this type of categorical data.
So it creates a misleading visual narrative.
It does. A column chart, like chart 2 we saw earlier, would be much better for comparing distinct categories.
And on top of that, chart A is missing a title and a label for the y-axis.
Right, which makes it pretty much useless for actual communication. What are we even looking at? What do the values mean? It fails on multiple levels.
Okay, bad choice of chart type and missing essential labels. What about chart B? It's a multiple line chart showing costs for 3 raw materials. What's wrong here?
The fundamental problem in chart B is the scale. Look at the y-axis. It goes from $3 all the way up to $9.
Okay, seems reasonable enough to cover all the costs.
It covers the range, yes, but it's too broad. Because the overall scale is so wide, it flattens out potentially important fluctuations in the individual material costs. For example, look closely at the line for material A. It seems fairly stable, right?
Yeah, it looks pretty flat around the $4 to $5 mark.
But is it really? The broad scale might be hiding volatility. Small ups and downs that could be significant for purchasing decisions are completely obscured. You just can't see the detail.
So the scale is too zoomed out, basically.
Exactly. Now compare chart B to chart 16. Chart 16 shows only the costs for raw material A, but with a much more appropriate, tighter scale on the A-axis.
Whoa, okay. Now you can clearly see material A's cost is actually bouncing around quite a bit between $4 and $5. Those fluctuations imperfections were totally invisible in Chart B.
Precisely. It's the difference between seeing a perfectly smooth highway from a satellite image versus seeing all the bumps and potholes when you're actually driving on it. That detail matters. Using the wrong scale hid the risk or volatility.
That really highlights how scale isn't just a technical detail. It's fundamental to accurate interpretation.
Absolutely fundamental.
Okay, last example is bad practice. Chart C and Chart D. What's going on here? Chart C is a stacked column chart.
Yes, and look what it's stacking. It's attempting to combine total sales and total costs into one single stacked bar for each year.
Wait, adding sales and costs together? What does that number even represent?
Exactly. It represents nothing meaningful. It's like adding apples and oranges, or maybe apples and kilometers. The resulting total has no logical business interpretation. Why would you add your revenue and your expenses together into one bar?
It's completely nonsensical.
It is. This is a fundamentally inappropriate use of a stacked chart. Stacked charts are for breaking down a meaningful total into its components, not for adding unrelated figures together.
In Chart D, it's a 100% stacked chart doing the same thing.
Yes, Chart D suffers from the exact same conceptual flaw. It takes that meaningless total of sales plus costs and then shows sales and costs as percentages of that meaningless total. It's nonsense compounded.
So these aren't just poorly designed charts. They're presenting fundamentally flawed logic.
Precisely. And this isn't just a theoretical problem. Presenting data like this, maybe showing a combined sales and cost bar growing, could completely obscure the fact that costs are skyrocketing and profits are plummeting. It's not just confusing, it's potentially dangerous for decision-making.
Wow. So the lesson is, even with fancy software that can make any chart you ask for,
You, the user, still have to think critically. You need to select the appropriate chart type for your data and your message. And you need to pay careful attention to essential elements like clear titles, labeled axes, appropriate scales, and legends. The goal is always effective communication that aids understanding and good decision-making, not just creating a visual.
we have covered a lot of ground today. A real deep dive, wasn't it?
It certainly was.
From using basic columns and lines for trends, to comparing multiple data sets, breaking down totals with stacked and pie charts, exploring relationships with scatter plots, and maybe most importantly, learning what not to do, the common pitfalls to avoid.
Yeah, the variety of chart types is huge, and each really does have its own specific strengths and its own weaknesses or limitations.
So if we kind of connect this back to the bigger picture, what's the main takeaway?
I think the real power of data visualization at the end of the day isn't just about making data look pretty. It's about choosing the right visual tool to unlock and clearly communicate the story that's hitting within the numbers. Because information, knowledge, it's most valuable when it's clear, when it's properly understood, and when it can actually be applied effectively.
That's really well put. And it raises, I think, an important final question for you, our listener.
Yeah.
The next time you encounter a chart, maybe it's in a work report, maybe a presentation, maybe just scrolling through the news online, are you just going to absorb it at face value? Or will you, maybe pause for a second, will you think critically about why that specific chart type was chosen? Consider how it's designed, the scale, the colors, the type itself might be shaping how you perceive that information. What story is it really telling? And maybe, just maybe, is there another story it might be hiding?
Always worth asking.
There's always more to learn, just by looking a little closer.